Hello, for anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Elaine, as Martin said. I work for the local record centre in South East Wales, so we're just outside Cardiff. And I'm going to talk a bit about an event we ran this summer called Wales Garden BioBlitz that we sort of adapted to lockdown by creating this event. Next slide, please, Martin. So how did we get here? Basically, each year in Wales, we have an event, sort of a week-long festival, I suppose it is, called Wales Nature Week, which would normally involve a lot of outdoor events organised by local authorities and other organisations. Obviously this year, because it was in early June, it wasn't possible to have many outdoor events, or any in fact at the time. So we were asked by the organisers of Wales Nature Week to create a recording event that could be done from home. So the 4 record centres in Wales work very closely together, so we came together as a team. And we decided to adapt the concept of Garden BioBlitz, which was a national event that ran from 2013 to 2017. So that was organised by a few different organisations on a national level, and we kind of took their idea and adapted it to a Wales-only event. Next slide, please, Martin. So how do we set up? How do we get going? I imagine that the majority of people here know what a BioBlitz is and have experienced one themselves, but just in case you haven't, a normal BioBlitz is an event where recorders and generally members of the public are asked to come together on a site on a particular date to record as many species as possible, to create a big species list for that site. Quite often they're large public-facing events with different timed sessions and experts doing some teaching, etc. Obviously this year it was impossible to meet in person, certainly at the time in Wales. So a Garden BioBlitz is a very similar concept, but rather than gathering in one place, we asked people to spend a day looking in their garden, or if they didn't have a garden, they could go to their park, a local park or whatever, to just build up a species list basically and learn a bit more about what was on their doorstep. So a big part of the setup was data flow, because obviously if you go and ask people to record in this way, it's going to result hopefully in a lot of data. So we wanted to make things as simple as possible, both for ourselves as the record centres, but particularly for the recorders. So we were hoping, and did get a lot of established recorders involved, and we didn't want to interrupt their existing recording system. So established recorders know what they like, they know how they want to share data, and we said to them, do what you normally do. We'll worry about the data gathering at the other end of it. So if they were MapMate users or iRecord users, if they wanted to email us data or send in a spreadsheet, it was all fine. They could do what they liked. For newcomers, so we imagined that this event would probably attract some new recorders because it was a bit more high profile. We suggested the use of the iRecord system, but in the local version. So each of the 4 Welsh record centres have their own local version of iRecord online on the website. So we suggested that they use those. Or alternatively, we have the Lurk Wales app. So that's the iRecord app in a bilingual Welsh version. So we suggested that to newcomers as well. And then from our point of view as data managers, we were thinking, how can we deal with this large amount of data coming in the simplest way possible? So we just made the decision that we were going to include all records that came in with that date on it. So it may be that some of the data, the people who sent it in didn't realise they were taking part in Wales Garden BioBlitz, but we just decided it was the simplest way to gather the data together. So anything that came in with that date on has gone into our pot of the total species list, etc. Then we needed to be able to communicate this to everybody. It was a reasonably complex concept for certainly newcomers to explain. All of the record centres have their own email lists, so we sent out instructions via email. We all have social media presences, so we came up with a Twitter hashtag and created Facebook events so people could. It wasn't just about communicating us to recorders, we wanted recorders to be able to communicate with each other. So the social media side of things allowed that to happen. We also came up with a timetable for the day, which is fairly common for BioBlitzes, so that we could sort of say, go and look for this thing at this time, and that sort of kept people on message, kept them engaged with the day. And then the final thing we wanted to do before we started was to make sure there was a good feedback loop in place. So people were taking the time to do this recording, go out and spend the day in their garden. We wanted to make sure that we fed back to them like the headline data totals, the national list, etc., in a timely manner. Because the worst thing is if you put time into something and then you never hear back about how it went. So we had a deadline for people to send their data in, and then we had a deadline within the lurks to get the data together and to create national lists, etc. Next slide, please, Martin. So what were those headline results? Very pleased to say that it was the most prolific recording day in Wales to date from the Record Centre's point of view. We had over 7,000 records come in of over 1,500 different species, which is brilliant. I think that shows the amount of knowledge and skills that are in the recording community in Wales. And then we had over 250 individuals get involved as well. Next slide, please, Martin. So if we analyze the data a bit more, hopefully you can read this. This is the top 10 species, so these are the most prolifically recorded during the day, and they're color-coded. So light blue is birds, red is insects, and the green are plants. So as you can see, it's very much dominated by birds. As an entomologist, I was very pleased to see that a moth made it into the top 10. So heart and dot moth was very prolific this spring, so it made sense that that made it into the top 10. And then we have a couple of plants that made it in as well. I mean, the great thing about this event was that we weren't rarity chasing, as others have mentioned earlier this morning. It's really important to keep recording the common things, because if we don't have that baseline data, we don't know when things are changing. So, I mean, how often do you think to record the daisies in your lawn if you're not asked to do it by somebody? So it is great to see that we got some common plants in this top 10 as well. Next slide, please, Martin. So this is drilling down into the data a little bit more. So this is the number of records per taxon group, so per like birds, plants, etc. So here we can see the top 3 groups that made it into the top 10 species. Flowering plants in the green, far and away the most number of records, nearly 2,000 of those. Then we have birds at nearly 1,200, and then moths, just about 700 different records. And then we had a lot of other species, as you can see. I think we had about 35 taxon groups recorded, which was great. I think that worms might have been the lowest. Sorry, Kieran. I think there was 1 worm record. So yes, if we go to the next slide, please, Martin. So this is the number of species divided by taxon group. So we can see again that plants come up top. So plants are very biodiverse, and people recorded a lot of different species of them. Then we have moths, around 300 species. So again, they're quite a biodiverse group, got a lot of different species recorded. And then we have to go down quite a long way to get to birds. Less than 100 bird species were recorded. So when we compare that to the number of records, we can see why birds are dominated the top 10, because they're not a very biodiverse group, but we got a lot of records. So all that data comes together to make a bird-heavy species list. And that is the case with a lot of data management, a lot of data projects. Birds are very popular to record, and there is always sort of a heavy weighting giving to birds when you look at top 10s, etc. Blackbird always seems to come out on top whenever you look at data in this way, in Wales at least. Next slide, please, Martin. So I thought I'd share some pretty pictures, because we also all like to look at pretty pictures. So I'm just going to show some example records from the different time slots that we did. So at 5 AM we had a dawn chorus time slot. I'm not sure that many people made it to this one. I certainly didn't, but we still got a lot of bird records. So this is a lovely picture of a house sparrow by Pip Gray, and we have over 55,000 Welsh records. But as I said, it was important still to get the common species recorded. Next slide, please, Martin. Then at 8 AM we had a marvelous Moths slot. So we basically, the Record Centre staff all put their moth traps out the night before, and we shared pictures of highlights from those. And I was pretty jealous of my manager and his wife, who got this pretty hawk moth in their trap on the morning. And we have less than 1,500 records of this species in Wales, so quite a nice one to get. Next slide, please, Martin. Then at 11 AM we had a perfect pollinators slot, so we suggested that people maybe sit and look at a flower bed or some flower pots for some time and see what turned up. I wanted to highlight a fly in this presentation because they're often overlooked as pollinators. This is a sheepstrike greenbottle, photographed by Howard Burt, also known as the common greenbottle. And we only have 80 Welsh records, which sort of shows how diptera are very overlooked, under-recorded, because this is the common greenbottle. This is the one that people see a lot, but they're a little bit tricky to identify, so they don't get recorded. Next slide, please, Martin. Then at 2 o'clock, we had a fantastic flowers session. So we specifically asked people to look for wildflowers and what they might consider to be weeds in their garden. We didn't really want a lot of people recording what they had planted in their garden themselves. So we said to sort of look in pavement cracks, look in your flower beds and in your lawn and see what wildflowers there were. And we got quite a lot of daisy records. It made it into the top 10. This photo is by Gareth Farr. And we have over 17,000 Welsh records of daisy. Next slide, please, Martin. Then at 5 o'clock, we had a cool, creepy, crawly session, a little bit more vague than the other sessions, but basically we told people to, look under rocks, check under log piles, etc., to see if they could find wood lice, that sort of thing. I wanted to share this very charismatic looking insect, the woolly vine scale insect that Dave Slade found in his garden, because there is only 2 Welsh records of it, and the other Welsh record is from Dave's previous garden. So this is very much an overlooked species. It was good to get this record in. Next slide, please, Martin. And then at 9 o'clock, to finish the day off, we had a twilight highlight session. So some people were really lucky. They get hedgehogs in their garden, like this one from Chris Jones. We got a lot of nice bat records, and one person even had a glowworm in their garden, which is fantastic to hear about. And then we have nearly 15,000 records of hedgehog in Wales. And then we had a look at the geographic spread. So how many people across Wales had we reached and how many people had engaged with the event. So this is quite a simplistic map, which shows every 10 kilometre square that had at least one record in during the day. So it was great to see that, we had a great spread across the country. Certainly in mid Wales and in the west, it's very sparsely populated from a human point of view. So it was great that we managed, I think we probably got records from every unitary authority in Wales, which is great. Next slide, please, Martin. Then this is a slightly more sophisticated analysis of that data. So this is a heat map. So the lighter the colour, or the brighter the colour, the more records there were in that location. So this is almost a map, really, of the human population in Wales. You can see the South Wales Valley and Cardiff down in the southeast, and then Swansea, and then up in the north we've got Wrexham and Bangor, very well represented. But there are also some highlights in other places which show individual efforts. So that really bright yellow up in sort of North Mid Wales and over in Pembrokeshire on the coast. Those yellow circles are probably 1 or 2 individuals that have really made a difference by recording a lot during the day. So this map really shows the group effort, but also highlights the individual effort that was put in during the day. So that's the 2020 event. If you are interested in seeing more about it, you can search on Twitter for that hashtag Wales Garden BioBlitz, and that's got lots of nice photos and stuff that people shared during the day. We also have a page on our website that's got full species lists for Wales, and I think there's one just for Subrek there as well, if you're interested in the local stuff. And what we're going to do in 2021. So you may not realise, but you're actually in the middle of a BioBlitz right now if you want to get involved. The backlog BioBlitz is a slightly more unusual concept for a BioBlitz, but basically we've given people a time period, so a month. We've given people a location, which is their drawers and their computers and their notebooks, and we've asked people to gather data from them. So if you're like me, you might have drawers full of dead insects that you need to get around to identifying. You might have some spreadsheets, you might have some notebooks, you might have photographs that you sort of saved from the summer. And we kind of feel like January, during lockdown, you can't really go out very much, you can't really record very much at this time of year. So we're asking people to get that data out and send it to us. And you will be entered into a prize draw if you get involved. So there's a web link there. I'll put it into the chat afterwards as well, where you can find out a bit more about how to get involved. And I'm very pleased to say that Wales Garden BioBlitz will return this year as well. So it's going to take place on the 29th of May. So that's a date for your diaries. That's the first Saturday of Wales Nature Week this year. And we look forward to maybe even increasing, maybe even more records than we got in 2020. You never know. It depends how locked down people are at the time, but we are looking forward to it. So we hope that lots of you will get involved.